Let's now take a look at the international newspapers, and for that, of course, I'm joined by Elena Casas. Hello again, Elena. So our top story today, the elections in Egypt. What are the papers making of that?
Hello Claire. Have a look at this piece from the Egyptian blog The Arabist. It's interesting because they say the story around the elections has done a U-turn in the last 24 hours. Papers yesterday morning were talking about leftist parties planning to boycott the election process, demonstrators in Tahrir Square saying they weren't going to vote, and now we've seen a surprisingly high turnout. So what should we make of that change, they ask? Well, they say to start with we should bear in mind that Tahrir Square doesn't necessarily represent Egyptian public opinion as a whole. Your average Egyptian on the street is probably more likely to back the Muslim Brotherhood, who of course continue to call that party for the election process to go ahead as planned and are expected to do very well. They're more likely to back that point of view than those leftist demonstrators on the street in Tahrir Square who wanted the whole election process put back. So that's one thing they point out, but they do also say that a high turnout doesn't necessarily mean high support for the army itself. It just means Egyptians believe in the possibility of a democratic change. So that article quite ambivalent, at least, about the Muslim Brotherhood. But there's one piece in The Guardian, which is written by the former editor-in-chief of Al Jazeera TV, which says that if we want democracy in Egypt, then we need to embrace political Islam, saying if that's what Egyptians go out and vote for today, then we can't impose a more left-wing secular government led by, say, Mohammed al-Baradei on them, just because that's what the West would rather see.
And what are the papers making of these worsening relations between the US and Pakistan after that NATO airstrike that left 24 Pakistani soldiers dead over the weekend?
Well, there's some quite strongly worded editorials in today's papers in both countries. If we have a look at the right-wing American paper, The Washington Times, now they say that Pakistan is a safe haven for extremists. It does nothing to prevent insurgent cross-border operations, and it's increasingly clear, they say, that the US and Pakistan have few strategic interests in common. Now, the Pakistani newspaper Dawn takes a similar point of view from the other side of the story, if you like. They say this should be proof to Pakistanis that the US isn't their friend anymore, and why should Pakistan continue doing what the US wants in Afghanistan? They actually liken the relationship between the two countries to a violent marriage, saying that Pakistan is the battered wife and they should realise it's time for a divorce.
Right, heading across the channel now to the UK, public sector strike planned there for tomorrow.
Yes, the right-wing press have been really getting their teeth into unionists in recent days, as you might expect. There'll be a strong front page from the Daily Mail from yesterday saying nothing will stop us from striking, and they call the strikers antediluvian monsters. I think that means antiquated on the inside. But The Guardian is firing back today with 5 reasons why public sector workers should go on strike. Now, they say that this government doesn't seem to be listening to reason, so it's time for pressure. They say that the strikers are making a case for the quality of public services, not just the lives of the people who work in them, and also that the strike is a statement against the 1%. They say the British government is making the ordinary people, public sector workers, teachers and so on, pay for the mistakes that the bankers made, so we all ought to be backing their strike. George Osborne, though, the British Chancellor, announces a new austerity plan today, and he's under fire from all sides, not just from those strikers on the left, but also on the right. If we look at the Times' cartoon, they've got him trying to stick back together Britain's AAA with sticky tape as bits fall off it, and the Telegraph isn't too happy either at his new plan to announce some public sector investment today. They've called it Plan S for splurge in their editorial.
There is some good news today, though, for Brits.
Yes, there's one story in the Daily Mail saying that British men are better than the French at chatting women up. And they've done a poll of European women, and apparently more of them preferred British men than the French, although the Italians still came top of that poll. And you've got to wonder what British men these women had met, because according to another survey, also in the Daily Mail, 12% of British men, slightly worryingly, admit to having used the line, "Get your coat, you've pulled," and 5% admit to having used the truly awful, "Did it hurt when you fell from heaven?" So we've got to hope those European women didn't meet those particular British men.
I have to agree, that line is truly awful, that last one there.
I won't ask if you ever had it used on you, but I think
no
it's
comment
a bad
on that one, Elena. It is. I've heard it before, I'll say that much. Thanks very much for that look at the international newspapers, Elena.